Meg Tilly is not just an actress. She is a living paradox, a woman whose fragility appears so pronounced that one might think a light touch could shatter her, yet who has survived upheavals powerful enough to crush an entire life. On screen, she exists through silence, lowered eyes, and unspoken spaces. Off-screen, she survives through instinct, discipline, and a level of endurance very few ever truly see. From the ballet studio, where her youth was abruptly ended by a single fall, to Hollywood in the 1980s, where she unexpectedly became an Oscar-nominated actress, praised for her rare emotional depth, Meg Tilly did not rise through burning ambition, but through the cold adaptability of someone long accustomed to changing direction in order to survive. She never moved forward in a straight line. Every step she took was a forced turn. Fame, accolades, major roles, spotlights, expectations, everything arrived quickly, and just as quickly hardened into a cage. When Hollywood tried to fix Meg within the image of the fragile, wounded, easily broken woman, she began to reach her own limits. Her body resisted, her mind grew exhausted, and at the very moment when many would have clung to glory at any cost, Meg Tilly chose the opposite. She withdrew. The world saw only a career that disappeared. What remained unseen was a series of quiet tragedies, a childhood marked by abuse, wounds that were never fully healed, and repeated acts of surrendering paths she had sacrificed her entire life to pursue. In this story, we will step into the true life of Meg Tilly, not to admire the glow of fame, but to understand the cost of survival and why sometimes stepping away from the spotlight is the bravest act a person can make. Meg Tilly was born on February 14, 1960, in Long Beach, California. She grew up between two bloodlines. Her father was a Chinese-American businessman named Harry Chan. Her mother was Patricia Ann Tilly, a Canadian woman of Irish and Finnish descent who had worked as a teacher and performed on the theatrical stage. Art entered the family early, but stability did not. Yet growing up between two cultures did not mean Meg was raised to respect her own identity. After her parents' divorce in 1963, when she was only 3 years old, everything connected to her Chinese heritage gradually disappeared from family life, not because of distance, but because of denial. Meg later admitted that she was never taught to value her father's history or traditions. On the contrary, she grew up fearing that this part of herself had to be hidden, as if acknowledging it might lead to isolation, judgment, or exclusion. For many years, Meg learned to remain silent about half of who she was, believing that this truth could limit her roles, her opportunities, and even her acceptance in the outside world. Only in adulthood did Meg slowly find the courage to speak about it, first with those closest to her. And when she was not rejected, not judged, what she felt was not shame, but relief. That moment marked the beginning of her accepting herself as a whole, instead of continuing to live in fragments. After the divorce, Patricia took the children away from California and returned to Texada Island in British Columbia to live with their grandmother. Later, the family moved to Victoria. On the surface, it appeared to be a quiet, rural childhood. Behind closed doors, however, existed another reality, a household filled with instability and danger. Meg later spoke candidly about growing up in an environment where pedophiles came and went, where various forms of abuse were present. Her stepfather, John Ward, who raised her after the divorce, was violent and abusive. Meg's childhood was not shaped by gentle memories, but by the constant need to remain alert in order to survive. That environment, painful as it was, forged something Meg could never have learned from books: survival intuition. It was not rational deduction, but a physical sensation, a clear internal alarm when danger was near. Meg learned to trust it. It taught her when to leave immediately, to walk away from a place, a person, or a situation, without explanation, without justification. Her ability to read people and sense danger before it arrived was not a talent. It was a reflex shaped by a childhood that demanded self-protection. In that context, art became an escape. At age 12, Meg began studying dance, not only out of passion but as a way to stay away from her stepfather. Dance allowed her to exist in silence, in a family where speaking the truth could lead to punishment. Movement became the safest way to release joy, sorrow, anger, and fear. Within just a few years, Meg had become an exceptional ballet dancer. She attended Esquimalt High School in British Columbia, then continued her studies at Chief Sealth International High School in Seattle, Washington. Immediately after graduating, Meg left home and moved to the United States, not to seek fame, but to escape her past and pursue the only path that, at the time, could save her. In New York, Meg earned a full scholarship to study under Madame Darvash and Melissa Hayden, two of the most respected names in ballet. She joined the Connecticut Ballet Company, officially entering the professional dance world. In 1980, Meg made her first on-screen appearance as a dancer in Alan Parker's musical film Fame. Everything seemed to be falling into place until fate intervened. In 1979, during a rehearsal, a dance partner caused Meg to fall. The accident resulted in a severe back injury, serious enough to end her ballet career entirely. No drama, no warning. Just enough to close the door on the path she had devoted her entire adolescence to, pursuing. For many, it would have been the end. For Meg, it was yet another forced turn, as if life were continually testing how many times she could stand back up. Looking back, Meg has said that without such a childhood, if she had never needed social workers, never learned to perform for teachers and peers in order to survive, she might never have become an actress. Dance was the first step, a language of silence. Acting came later as a safer way to speak, speaking through someone else's words, in someone else's role. Small steps, from silence to borrowed voices, before finally daring to search for her own. The intuition forged in years of instability continued to guide her. It put her on the bus to New York. It warned her when someone intended harm. It helped her negotiate, adapt, and escape from frightening situations. That childhood was a brutal trial, but also a gift of survival. Meg often speaks of the role her sisters played, especially Jennifer Tilly. To Meg, Jennifer's vivid imagination and fierce determination saved them. Without that imagination, the family might have slipped into darker paths. Numbing. Pain with alcohol or drugs. Meg admits she went through a lost phase around age 12, but they did not go too far. Jennifer taught them to imagine boldly, to believe they could become anyone, and that belief ultimately became their engine for living. There is one small memory Meg has always carried with her. Around the age of 7 or 8, she visited someone living in a trailer park. A white fence, flowers in front of the door, a quiet and ordinary life. That was her dream at the time. Not fame, just a safe place, however small. Life would later open paths far larger than anything she had imagined then. From that, Meg formed a principle she still lives by today. If you are afraid but know you will regret not doing it, then do it. Even if you only take a few steps, that path may lead somewhere you would never reach if you chose safety. Each time you move through fear, you strengthen your courage muscle. Success or failure matters less than having crossed the threshold of fear itself. When the ballet door closed, Meg left New York. She headed for Los Angeles, not with a perfect plan, but with the intuition that had saved her life more than once. And from that moment on, another chapter began. When the ballet door closed, Meg Tilly didn't just lose a profession, she lost a language. For years, she had learned to speak through the body, through discipline, movement, and emotions that did not need words. The back injury brought that path to an abrupt halt, leaving behind a void. She was forced to fill with another form of expression. That was when Meg turned to acting. But Meg did not enter acting to become famous. She entered it because it was a safer way to speak. She wasn't speaking in her own words, but through the words of a character. She was only playing a role, only pretending. For Meg, that felt like armor. You could release emotion without having to confront your own truth head-on. In fact, Meg's connection to acting began very early, through what seemed like an ordinary moment. As a child, she was drawn into the world of storytelling. Once, she watched a play at a local theater. The actors' energy, the way they transformed into characters, like a kind of magic, and it struck her deeply. For the first time, she wanted to step into that world, not as an audience member, but as someone inside the story. Her mother encouraged her. Meg began acting in school plays. In one memorable performance, she was cast in a leading role. The applause came, but what stayed with her was not the praise. It was the sense of connection. For the first time, she felt she had a purpose, as if something inside her had finally found its place. Later, at an acting summer camp, she met instructors who continued to nurture her ability and encourage her to pursue the craft. From those early rehearsals, Meg began to understand something very concrete. Every audition, every role, no matter how small, was a brick, deepening her love for the work and hardening her resilience. But those first bricks were not easy to lay. Meg grew up without financial comfort. Money pressure was not abstract. It pulled every dream back down to the ground. While pursuing acting, she worked multiple jobs just to get by. And despite her talent, she faced skepticism from within the industry. Her background, her circumstances, her past, all were seen as obstacles in a game as unforgiving as Hollywood. Meg did not respond by explaining herself. She responded with action. She took acting classes, joined workshops, refined her skills piece by piece, connected with young artist communities, and most importantly, she did not wait for opportunity to be granted. She created it herself. Meg's persistence is what rendered prejudice ineffective, not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because she understood that if she stopped, life would simply force her into another narrow corner. Then, Los Angeles emerged as an unavoidable transition. Meg arrived there not with a perfect plan, but with an instinct sharpened by years of upheaval. Keep moving, keep looking for another door. The early roles came quietly. Small projects, television work, parts not designed to explode. But Meg had an advantage many did not. She didn't perform in a showy way. She existed. She carried something real, fragile yet vigilant, as if behind every glance, there was an untold story. The turning point came when she was cast in Psycho 2. Meg played Mary Samuels, a character balanced on the thin line between safety and threat. Ironically, Meg herself did not carry the reverence for Psycho's legacy that people expected. She had never even seen the 1960 original. That lack of ritual led her to enter the film with pure instinct, and it collided with Hollywood in an uncomfortable way. The atmosphere on set was tense. Meg's relationship with Anthony Perkins grew difficult after what seemed like a small misunderstanding, but touched the pride of an icon. It was Meg's first direct encounter with the darker side of the profession, where legacy, power, and ego can outweigh the script itself. Despite the harsh experience, her performance forced people to reconsider. Audiences did not see just a pretty face. They saw genuine unease. Hollywood began to take notice of her name. Soon after, Meg appeared in The Big Chill. This time, she stood among a formidable ensemble and yet did not fade. Her Chloe was young but not naive, sensual without exhibition, a strange presence in the 1980s when everything was often boxed into formulas. Hollywood began to attach a label to Meg, fragile. But they didn't yet understand. This was not weakness. It was the trace of someone who had learned to survive through intuition. Then Agnes of God arrived as confirmation. Meg portrayed a young nun through silence, gaze, and unspoken spaces. And for the first time, the name Meg Tilly entered the industry's larger conversation, marked by an Oscar nomination that could not be ignored. Later, Meg would go even further, not only through acting. She has said that acting was a period when she could feel safe by borrowing other people's words. It wasn't until she began writing that she truly stepped into the power of her own language. It was a long journey, taken in small steps, from silence to borrowed voices, and finally, to speaking in her own true voice. This was not the summit, only the first moment Hollywood truly learned her name. After the Oscar nomination, Meg Tilly was no longer an experimental choice. She entered a phase in which Hollywood genuinely needed her, not to fill a gap, but to carry weight. From 1986 through the early 1990s, Meg's name appeared repeatedly in major projects, all sharing one defining trait: central female characters who were complex, demanding, and not easily consumed. The post-Oscar run firmly established that position. She starred in Masquerade, a psychological thriller in which the female character is not merely a victim, but the keeper of secrets. According to Roger Ebert, one of Hollywood's most influential critics, Masquerade was compelling not because of its twist, but because of Meg Tilly. She did not play sharpness or dominance. She chose dreaminess and fragility, unsettling the audience. While the character still believed in love, viewers could already sense the web of deception tightening. It was precisely that innocence, Ebert noted, that made the film dangerous. She followed with Valmont, directed by Milos Forman, where she stood amid a seasoned European Hollywood ensemble and still maintained a distinct presence. Impulse pushed her further into darker territory, instinct and sexuality, a genre Hollywood believed only Meg could inhabit without turning the character cheap. With Leaving Normal, Meg entered a very different emotional space. The film was quickly compared to Thelma and Louise, an unavoidable comparison, critics said, given that Leaving Normal premiered less than a year later. Yet that comparison ultimately highlighted something essential. This was not a story of rebellion, but of quiet escape by people already exhausted. Meg played Marianne, a slight, inward woman who has just left a marriage marked by psychological abuse. Critics observed that she portrayed the character with an almost troubling fragility, a woman who had lived through marriage, yet still carried the posture of a child who had never been properly protected. In contrast to her tougher, more experienced companion, Meg's character seemed to exist in a private inner world, one where fear did not erupt, but smoldered. What is notable is that, according to many reviews at the time, Leaving Normal deliberately denied the audience clear answers. We never fully know what the two women are searching for, nor whether they truly find it. That very incompleteness made Meg's performance haunting, because she embodied not a victorious journey, but someone simply trying to survive after too much fracture. The role earned Meg Tilly a Golden Globe nomination, and, inadvertently, closed nearly a decade in which she continuously embodied wounded, lost, psychologically burdened women. This was not a dazzling peak, but a point of saturation. By the time Hollywood finally acknowledged the full depth of her talent, Meg had begun to ask herself, how much further could she go in roles like these? Professionally, this was an undeniable high point. Meg no longer had to fight for parts. Scripts came to her. She had the right to choose, to refuse, to work with major directors. Within the industry, Meg Tilly was regarded as a quiet IT girl, absent from tabloids, uninterested in spectacle, yet trusted whenever a film required depth rather than surface appeal. But that image also became an invisible cage. Hollywood began repeating Meg within a familiar formula, the fragile, sensual woman with underlying unease. Posters emphasized the body. Media emphasized the melancholy. Roles increasingly demanded that she excavate darker emotional terrain, where trauma was no longer material for performance, but lived experience. Meg was not typecast because she lacked range. She was typecast because she did those roles too well. Then the crisis arrived, not as scandal, but as exhaustion. A serious car accident in 1991 left Meg's body unable to sustain the pace she once kept. Chronic. Pain forced her to stop in an industry that waits for no one. When the spotlight receded, Meg Tilly did not disappear. She changed how she existed. Some people, when leaving a familiar path, become disoriented and hollow, as if all value were bound to a single identity. Meg was different. She carried everything she had lived: the discipline of dance, the sensitivity of acting, the silences accumulated over years, into another form of expression: writing. Her debut novel, Singing Songs, 1994, drew attention for its quietness and sincerity. Readers found childhood memories rendered without ornament, gentle yet deeply unsettled, a voice that made them feel understood rather than directed. But it was Gemma, 2006, that confirmed Meg Tilly as a serious writer. The novel was raw and unflinching, addressing child abuse with a level of honesty that forced many readers to pause mid-page. Gemma was not easy to read, but it was widely praised for its psychological depth and courage, often described as painful but necessary. It is a stark, haunting account of childhood sexual abuse, and it later prompted Meg to speak publicly about having been abused herself as a child. This is something not every artist can do. To walk away from what made their name and test themselves in an entirely new territory, one without roles to shield them, without cameras to soften the truth, leaving only memory, language, and naked honesty. And it is there that something becomes clear. Meg Tilly's talent was never confined to a single stage. 3 different paths, all converging on the same destination: a desire to live truthfully, and to tell that truth in the most complete way she possibly could. Those choices did not shape her career alone. They quietly shaped the way Meg loved, the way she attached, and the way she learned to leave when a relationship was no longer a safe place. Running parallel to her turbulent artistic journey, Meg Tilly's personal life was in constant motion, sometimes moving in harmony with her work, sometimes colliding head-on with it. The marriages in Meg's life became clear markers of her psychological state at different stages, and these were the relationships that accompanied her through those defining moments. Meg Tilly's first marriage came very early, not as a romantic fairy tale, but as a necessary anchor. She married Tim Zinnemann when she was still very young, during the period when she was transitioning from dance to acting, long before she had truly secured a place in Hollywood. Fame was still far away then. Both of them were still learning how to become adults, trying to build a future while figuring out who they were. Tim. worked in film production, but at that time, he was not yet a widely recognized name. As a result, their marriage was far more ordinary than people might assume. No glamour, no parties, no spotlight, just two young people trying to create a home amid very real instability. Meg became a mother to two children at a very young age. In later years, she openly acknowledged that early motherhood, combined with financial pressure and the uncertainty of an unformed career, gradually weighed down the marriage. She was forced to divide herself between two worlds: an entertainment industry that constantly demanded more, and a family life that required her full presence, all while she herself was still trying to understand who she was. The marriage ended in the late 1980s, just before Meg's career entered its most critical phase. There was no scandal, no public drama, simply two young people who had grown in different directions. Looking back, her relationship with Tim Zinnemann is often seen as the foundational chapter of Meg Tilly's life, where she learned responsibility, boundaries, and the cost of growing up too early. It was also where she first established a clear distance from the image of the typical Hollywood star that the public often expects, a distance she would maintain for the rest of her life. If Meg Tilly's first marriage was tied to a need for stability when she was still too young, the relationship that followed emerged at a very different moment, when she was beginning to be seen, to be recognized, and, at the same time, more vulnerable than ever. Meg met Colin Firth in the late 1980s during the filming of Valmont. At that point, both of them were standing at the threshold of breakthrough. Meg had just come off an Oscar nomination, while Colin was seeking a foothold in Hollywood after early success in Europe. Their connection did not grow out of glamour, but from a shared sense of being in between ambition and doubt, between expectation and unease. This relationship carried a very different tone, less domestic, more charged with feeling, less rooted in the need for safety, more shaped by the friction of two creative personalities moving at speed. They had a son together, a bond that was deeply real. But that same bond also intensified the pressure as both of their careers entered an accelerating phase. Meg has said very little about this relationship, but what can be read between the lines is a familiar exhaustion. The effort of being present for the person you love while trying to stay balanced in an industry that constantly pulls people away from private life. No one was at fault, but the timing was no longer right. When the relationship ended in the early 1990s, it was not a dramatic rupture, but the quiet separation of two trajectories drifting further and further apart. For Meg, this period marked the beginning of a realization. Love, when it is not accompanied by inner safety, can easily become another form of trial, no matter how gentle the person offering it. The relationship left no scandal behind, but it left a question about the cost of loving while both people are being carried forward by their own careers. And that question would directly shape Meg Tilly's later decision to step away from Hollywood. In 1995, Tilly married John Calley, an American film executive and producer 30 years her senior. They lived in Los Angeles, where Calley served as chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment. The marriage ended in divorce in 2002, without controversy or public conflict. After relationships defined by instability and constant motion, Meg Tilly entered her third marriage from an entirely different place. No longer searching, no longer proving herself, and no longer moving to Hollywood's rhythm. When Meg married Don Calam in 2002, she had already stepped away from the spotlight. Don was not part of the entertainment world. He was an American businessman working in finance and management, a world completely separate from film sets, media attention, and the pressure of fame. That very outsider position became the defining difference of this marriage. There were no packed shooting schedules, no roles lined up back to back, no relationships formed through professional ambition. Meg began living more quietly, devoting her time to family and to writing. For the first time, love no longer ran parallel to her career. It existed as an independent space of safety. If the first two marriages reflected a need to anchor herself when she was too young, and then a need for companionship during a period of intense motion, her marriage to Don Calame reflected something else entirely: the ability to be still with herself. Not a retreat born of failure, but a conscious choice. After Meg had come to understand what she needed, and just as importantly, what she no longer did. In the full arc of Meg Tilly's personal life, the third marriage is not a dramatic climax. It is a quiet passage. Yet, it is precisely this quiet that most clearly reveals the maturity she had to travel a long way to reach. But beneath these emotional choices lay another force quietly shaping every decision Meg Tilly made, one that rarely appeared in headlines, yet never left her life: her body. After two serious physical traumas, one in her youth on the ballet floor and another in adulthood, Meg's health could no longer be taken lightly. Physical limits gradually made themselves known, not explosively, not theatrically, but clearly enough to force her to reconsider how she lived, how she loved, and how she continued forward. Meg rarely speaks publicly about pain. She does not turn her health into a narrative of tragedy. Yet those limitations taught her something with absolute clarity. Not every relationship can survive if the body no longer has the strength to keep carrying the weight. And from that point on, every choice in Meg Tilly's personal life, whether to stay or to leave, to hold on or to let go, began to rest on a different foundation: safety, not only emotional but physical as well. When her private choices finally settled, the question was no longer how Meg Tilly was living, but rather, what does she leave behind after deliberately stepping out of the spotlight? And it is precisely in that quiet space that Meg Tilly's legacy becomes clearer than ever. Her legacy does not lie in the number of films she made, nor in a single iconic image. She left her mark through a rare kind of presence in Hollywood: women who were fragile but never weak, silent but never passive, wounded yet never reduced to victims. At a time when cinema favored rigid templates, Meg repeatedly chose, and was chosen for, roles that demanded psychological depth rather than surface allure. Her influence unfolds on two levels. For audiences, Meg Tilly came to represent a generation of actresses willing to enter the darker interior spaces, willing to be difficult to watch in order to preserve a character's truth. Her performances did not aim to please, they compelled viewers to stay and to think. For artists who followed, Meg's path set an important precedent: that stepping away is not the same as failing, that a career can take many forms, and that an artist's value does not vanish when they refuse to continue being exploited. Meg Tilly did not build her legacy through longevity on screen. She built it through choice, both in stepping in and in stepping out. Today, Meg Tilly lives in Canada with her husband, entirely removed from Hollywood and the pace of the entertainment industry. She does not seek a return to acting, nor does she maintain a public media presence. She spends most of her time with family and writing. She continues to publish novels, but without rigid schedules or market pressure. Writing for her is no longer a second career. It is a way of living, quiet and self-directed. In the rare interviews she gives, Meg speaks of her past with calm clarity. She does not deny hardship, but neither does she dwell on it. Acting is acknowledged as a chapter, now closed, meaningful, but no longer central to her life. In 2018, Tilly published the first novel in her Solace Island trilogy, a romantic mystery series centered on Maggie Harris, a young woman who begins dating a handsome, mysterious man after being abandoned by her fiancé. The follow-up novels, Cliff's Edge and Hidden Cove, were released soon after. In 2021, Tilly's most recent novel, The Runaway Heiress, another romantic mystery, was published, a testament to the sustained creative energy of someone who has faced many choices and many turning points. Meg Tilly's story is not about reaching the peak and holding on at all costs. It is about knowing when to change direction, when the body speaks, when the mind reaches its limit, when a different rhythm becomes necessary. From dance to acting to writing, each passage demanded sacrifice. Yet Meg chose to move forward sustainably, without trading health for success, without turning trauma into entertainment. In an industry that constantly demands more, she chose enough and lived fully within that choice. Which phase of Meg Tilly's life resonates most with you? Her acting in the 1980s-90s, or her journey as a novelist? Share your perspective in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about backstage lives and quiet turning points that shape destiny, don't forget to like and subscribe for more episodes ahead.